And then looking back, how do you view the war? Was it necessary?
That's one of those six of one and half a dozen of the other kind of questions. I think it's important for there to be freedom everywhere around the world, and it seems like through history, our country has been involved in ensuring that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we lost an awful lot of young men during that war, and there has to be a better way to settle conflict than actual guns and tanks and bombs and killings.
What was the most memorable event you had from the Vietnam War?
Well, I'm going to switch to another question because they're linked.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most vivid thing for me was that my college friend Danny O'Sullivan was drafted, and so he signed up and went in as an officer, and he, I believe, had two different tours in Vietnam. One of the tours, at least, was he was in charge of the officers club uh, on on the base, and I think he was in Saigon. When he came back from the war, and when he was no longer serving in Vietnam itself, he was part of a special unit who, of three men and him, who went to the funerals of the soldiers when they came back to do the taps at the graveside. That was a very emotional and very draining duty, but it was also an honor. And so I remember that just so vividly. And then I also remember that his wife and son were here in this country, still left behind. And so Sheila, my friend, was raising their child alone, so that the difficulty extended to her too.
So how long was he there for?
I think 6 years,
6 years.
or in two different tours.
And
That,
do you remember him being like different when he came back?
well, he was more mature, but then he was older. So um, I don't think that Danny actually did any fighting. So it would have been more what he saw from the men who were doing the fighting.
Okay. And then at your church, were there groups for veterans coming back? Did you do any help for the veterans with soup kitchens or helping them find a job or anything like that?
Don't I wish? There was very little of that in the country, but I do know that my friend Richard's home church brought over and sponsored a Vietnamese family and helped them to get settled here in this country. They later came here to Philadelphia, the family did, and they had a restaurant down in Chinatown, a Vietnamese restaurant. And at least once a year, Richard and Bill and I would go to that restaurant and visit with them and eat their very, very good food.
And there were. How were the veterans treated once they got back?
I believe they were treated very poorly. People did not didn't see the reason why we had been there, and I think a lot of people lost sight of the fact that they were asked to be there. They were fulfilling a duty and obligation as an American citizen. I met a young man the other day who had been in the war. He'd been all over the world during that war, and he had been in, I believe, a parade when a man and lady came up to him and the woman spit all over him. And he was so upset that he told me he just made a fist and he punched out the man. Now, he hadn't done it, but he said he was told never to hit a woman or a child. And the woman shouted at him she was going to call the police, and he said, go right ahead, I'll stay here and wait. And I know she's not the only one. There were anti-war signs and anti-military men all over the place. And it certainly didn't make them feel good. and they had each other to lean on because they know the horrors they had seen.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.